Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea Livingston, and I am delighted to welcome you to Consciousness for the Next Generation. This is a 6-month webinar series, and I'm just really excited to be along on this learning journey with you all. And we decided to host this webinar to speak specifically to young people interested in consciousness studies and consciousness research, and to find out what it is, why it matters, and what are some of the larger social implications of doing this work, and also to find out how do we get into this field, how do we make a difference and pursue a career within this field. So we wanted to answer some of those questions for you all and also give you a chance to interact and ask live questions to leading researchers, educators, and innovators within this field. So for those of you who may not know, IONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, is a 43-year-old nonprofit organization, and here we are really dedicated to supporting individual and collective transformation. And how we do that is through this consciousness research that you'll hear a little bit about today, transformative learning, and of course engaging a global community, which you all are a part of. So welcome. And this series is going on the first and third Wednesday of every month all the way through December, and it's going to be at 4 p.m. Pacific time. So if this is your first time, definitely come back and join us. We have a really great lineup for you all for the next several months. So we are really blessed to have Helané Wahbeh with us. She is an IONS scientist, and she's also an adjunct assistant professor in the Department of Neurology at Oregon Health and Science University. She is a naturopath physician researcher with a Master of Clinical Research. And she's also published on post-traumatic stress disorder, stress hormones, physiological outcomes of mind-body medicine, and immune outcomes in mind-body medicine, and the use of objective adherence in mind-body medicine studies. So she is just a real amazing researcher with a rich background that she's going to be talking about today, and some really fascinating and interesting research within meditation and this mind-body connection within healing. So as you're listening to the presentation, if you have any questions, you can write in your questions in the control panel on the right side of your screen. You'll see that there's a place to type in your questions. There's also a place to raise your hand. So you'll see kind of on the top left of your control panel, there's a little image of a hand that you can press to raise your hand, and we'll see that over here. And we'll be answering all of the questions at the very end, the last 10 or 15 minutes of the presentation, but you can type them in or raise your hand at any time, and we'll see it and we'll loop back to them at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, let me pass the mic over to Helané Wahbeh, and she's going to talk to us about the ins and outs of meditation research today. So Helané, thank you so much for being with us today, and take it away.
So I'm going to share with you, I call this the ins and outs of meditation research, and I will be talking about meditation research, but it's really the story of a clinical researcher and how I ended up to be here at Institute of Noetic Sciences doing the research that I am today. So this is me. I'm I think about 3 years old here, super inquisitive. I would take that little shovel and bucket and dig in the sand and find things. I always had this really inquisitive and curious mind about how the world worked. And growing up, this is my grandmother, and she would always tell me, you're going to grow up and be a doctor. You're going to be a doctor. I'd say, no, 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 I don't think I'm going to do that. But she saw something in me about this sort of healing and inquisitive nature of who I was. And I was actually named after my great-grandmother, Helane, who was a midwife and a healer for her village. And people would come to her from miles around to help heal their illnesses, to birth their babies. And I always heard amazing stories about my namesake, Helane. My family's also kind of unique in that I grew up Orthodox Christian. I went to church every Sunday, but then we would have seances at my grandparents' house once a week where we would sit around and my uncle would channel or my grandmother would channel, and I had this very sort of esoteric background as well. Each of my aunts and uncles here have some sort of psychic ability that my grandfather was very interested in studying. So I had this kind of esoteric background as well. I went to UC Berkeley for my undergrad, and I was still super curious about the world, and decided to do anthropology as my major. I kind of rebelled against this, you're going to be a doctor thing. I wanted to go my own way. So I was an anthropology major and did an archaeological dig up at Fort Ross here in California at this beautiful, amazing historical site, and really got to explore how different cultures interact with each other. And there's incredible diversity around that. Through my anthropology courses, I took one class called medical anthropology and found out about something called naturopathic medicine. When I thought about being a doctor, I saw the Western model of allopathic medicine, and there was something about it that didn't quite fit for me. So I was really excited when I learned about naturopathic medicine. So I graduated from college and wanted to explore a little bit about naturopathic medicine and other things. So I ended up getting a research position. It was my first foray into research at the UC Davis Alzheimer's Disease Center. And there I worked with patients who had concerns about their memory. I was the psychometrist, which meant that I would do the cognitive testing on the patients to see how impaired they were with their memory. And then as part of a larger team, they would do a diagnosis and treatment of dementia and Alzheimer's there. So that was really exciting to me because it was my first taste of research and how research works and how you collect data and how you have to do it in a certain way and have research questions and how to design a study so you can answer those research questions. So through my kind of soul-searching process, I found that this naturopathic medicine was really what I wanted to do because it combined the curiosity, the inquisitiveness, and it had a philosophy that really resonated with me. So naturopathic medicine is founded on this philosophy that includes the healing power of nature, that we each have our own innate ability to heal within ourselves, that we want to identify and treat the causes of illness, so getting to the root cause of what is going on instead of just dealing with symptoms. First, do no harm, so that our treatments are ideally non-invasive and not harmful, that we're going to use the least dose possible to support a cure. Doctor as teacher, so walking your talk as a doctor and educating the person about health and wellness. Treating the whole person, so not just looking at one system, but looking at the big picture and the big picture of their health, and then also focusing on prevention. So that this whole philosophy really resonated with me, and I was fortunate enough to get into medical school and to get a clinical doctorate in naturopathic medicine. So in Oregon, California, Washington, and many other states throughout the country, naturopathic physicians are general primary care physicians and have all the rights to be able to see patients in that capacity. At the same time, during my naturopathic meditation school, that was when I got into meditation. So I was exposed to many different modalities, including mind-body medicine, and that really, really excited me. And I got to experience it firsthand through a spiritual teacher that I went and sat in darshan with, and just really resonated with the teachings, which basically said there's no one way, but here's one way, and if it resonates with you, then this can work for you. Learned how to meditate, did quite a bit of meditation, and got really convinced that meditation was an amazing tool that could really help me and potentially others, and that mind-body medicine is incredibly important and needed to be integrated into healthcare. So I graduated from naturopathic school and started my practice. I had a private practice where I saw patients for a variety of different illnesses, using the philosophy and all the tools that I had in my tool bag to support patients to heal. After a few years of doing private practice, I got this intuition that something was missing for me, and I didn't quite know what it was. And again, through some soul searching, I realized that I really wanted to get back into research. I didn't know where to start with that. When I was in school, we didn't have a research department. So I just started kind of asking around and found out that the school that I went to actually developed a research department, and now there was one. So it's called the HealthGot Research Institute, and I volunteered there until I was able to get a postdoctoral position. And through that position, I did my first research studies, and those were on binaural beats. And we looked at, they were small pilot studies. We looked at if the binaural beats actually did the entrainment of the brain waves. And then we also looked at the effects of binaural beats. I don't know if any of you have heard of binaural beats, but it's when you hear two different sound frequencies in each ear. So this ear might hear a beat that's at 10 hertz, and this ear might hear a beat that's at 18 hertz. And the difference between the two, 8 hertz, is what you would essentially hear in the brain, and that brain waves could entrain to that, so they would start modulating at 8 hertz as well. So hertz means cycles per second. So there was a lot of media coverage about this topic recently, because there's something called iDosing and digital drugs where people said that they could create binaural beats that would replicate ayahuasca or peyote or all these different drugs, and essentially allow people from listening to these sounds to have this drug-induced state. Anyway, I got interviewed by a number of media stations as the expert scientist who's saying, well, we didn't really see that, it does the entrainment. So maybe there's something else going on there, but that it's not the same thing as taking the drug. So when I was at HealthGot, I learned about another postdoctoral opportunity where I could deepen my research expertise, and this was at the Oregon Health and Science University. So I applied for that postdoctoral fellowship and received it. In the Department of Neurology, there exists the Oregon Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine and Neurological Disorders. So they had a postdoctoral program that I applied for and was accepted to. So through that program, I enrolled in something called the Human Investigations Program, and that was a pretty rigorous education in clinical research. And I eventually received my master in clinical research from that. So that was, about 2 years of coursework, including biostatistics and clinical design and how to conduct human research. Many other classes like that. But that was a really great foundation for me about what is research, what is clinical research, how do you do it in a very rigorous and systematic way. A couple years into my postdoctoral fellowship, I applied for a what's called a Career Development Award. So usually after a postdoc in academic kind of research tracks, you would apply for a Career Development Award, which is a mentored award that allows you more funds to do a research project. So I applied for that through the National Institute of Health and received that. It was a 5-year grant, and the clinical study I was working on was mechanistic pathways of mindfulness meditation and post-traumatic stress disorder. I was really interested in how meditation worked, and through many synergistic synchronicities, ended up working with people with post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't really have enough time to get into all that today, but maybe we'll have some time during the questions to get into that. So, I started becoming the expert in PTSD and mindfulness meditation. I did a systematic review with a team looking at complementary and alternative medicine for PTSD and found 9 meditation studies that actually showed pretty good evidence for using meditation for PTSD. And the paper for that 5-year study was actually just published about 6 months ago, showing that we did see changes from the mindfulness meditation, and that the way mindfulness meditation worked, especially in our study, was probably top down, meaning that their perceptions and beliefs about their symptoms is kind of what affected the changes that we saw in their PTSD. So, okay, this was my kind of like an overview of my academic research career. So 10 years of academic research career. So this isn't necessarily a brag about me, but just to say, hey, this is what academic research means. It means publishing peer-reviewed papers, it means doing poster presentations, book chapters, lots of scientific presentations, writing tons of grants, mentoring other students, and that, there's a very kind of specific track that academic research expects of you, and that there are high standards for the type of work that you produce in order to continue growing in your academic field. So there was a bit of a glitch for me as I continued at Oregon Health and Science University with my meditation research, because I found that I couldn't really ask all the questions that I wanted to ask. So in our materialistic paradigm, that's kind of the dominant paradigm right now, the brain is basically where our consciousness lies, and that our consciousness does not go beyond our physical brain. But this kind of puts blinders on in terms of the questions that we can ask. So, for example, in the meditation research, that meant I could only do objective physiological outcomes. I couldn't ask, well, how are you interacting with your teacher? Are you feeling any energy from your teacher? Or, are you having any paranormal experiences during your meditation? Those couldn't even be asked. There's so much more that people experience during meditation and between each other as people that I felt like I couldn't really get into at OHSU. It just wasn't accepted to be able to ask those research questions. So there's actually, I believe, a revolution going on in science, because this materialistic paradigm just isn't really standing up to the evidence that we're seeing, especially with quantum physics and the concept of non-local consciousness, that we really can study these broader aspects of consciousness in a systematic and rigorous way. And so I decided to step out of my kind of conservative academic world, and that's how I ended up here at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. I was invited to come to a Future of Meditation meeting, which I will share with you a little bit more later. that happened here at IONS as an expert in meditation, and saw the work that IONS was doing and was like, wow, I would love to be part of this team. And over the course of a few years was able to come be here. So I'm very, very grateful for that. We have a wonderful and amazing synergistic team of scientists from many different fields, and we all feel incredibly fortunate to be working with each other in this area, because we get to look beyond the veil. We get to say, okay, well, this is what we see on the surface, but what's actually behind that? What are the pieces that are behind the veil, that the questions that people aren't really asking, but that we are increasingly having the courage to ask, and that we can study them with rigorous and systematic methods. It's not that we're throwing the whole scientific methods out the window. We're still using rigorous methods, but we aren't afraid to ask the difficult questions that might push against our dominant paradigm. So about meditation, it used to be that this was the type of person that you'd think of when you'd think of a meditator, but that's not true anymore. The interest in meditation is growing substantially. In the 80s, you can see here that there's only 36 papers that were published, and if you go up here to 2015, there's 385, and this is a whole exponential curve of growth of the publications that have been put out on meditation. So it's not so uncommon. A survey that was done in 2009 of Americans, there were about 30 million Americans that meditated, and in 2002 it was actually 17 million. So that number doubled in 7 years. I think it's time to re-up this Haynes survey that they did, and I imagine it will be quite a bit more. So now we have CEOs meditating at Apple and Google and Nike. They're included in employee wellness programs. It seems like meditation is everywhere, and that anyone can meditate. Even dogs can meditate. It's on the cover of Time and Newsweek, The Mindful Revolution, the science of finding focus in a stressed out multitasking culture. So meditation, especially mindfulness, is kind of the new hip thing. Meditation's been around for a very, very long time. It existed before written history. It was usually as part of a religious framework. And there's many different styles of meditation. There's not really one kind of concise definition of meditation, but there are some common themes. One is that there's a self-observation of mental activity, that there's a piece of attentional focus training, and that we want to cultivate an attitude that highlights the process of what we're doing rather than the content. So when we're thinking about, or when we're observing what we see in our mind, we're in the process of it rather than the content of what we're thinking. There's been some great work done about the different types of meditation, like focused attention, open monitoring, and automatic self-transcending. Fred Travis at Maharishi University did a really nice study reviewing the different EEG studies that have been done on these different meditation types. And so I want to spend a little time talking about mindfulness and how that has become big. And so, I'm taking this kind of background into meditation to just look at the field, like what's happening in the meditation field, what has been studied. And if you decide you want to be a meditation researcher, what are the areas that you could focus on where there really is a big need, especially in these noetic concepts. So first, let's just talk about mindfulness. So mindfulness is most often defined by Jon Kabat-Zinn as paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So this paying attention piece is observing your moment-to-moment experience, what's going on inside of you and also outside of you. In a particular way, has to do with the attitude that we bring to the meditation, like non-judging, patience, beginner's mind. And then on purpose has to do with setting an intention. Why are you meditating? What's your motivation behind your practice? And then just acknowledging that it's totally normal for your mind to wander and that the whole process is just bringing your focus back to the present moment. Sometimes it's easier to understand mindfulness by what is not mindful, or the opposite, which we can call automatic pilot. So I don't know how many of you have been driving and thinking about something that has engrossed your attention, and all of a sudden you end up at home and you're like, oh wow, I have no idea the last 10 miles of how I actually got here. So that's kind of the opposite of mindfulness. So mindfulness is really wonderful because it can actually be applied to just about anything. We have our formal practices like sitting meditation and the body scan and mindful movement, but there's informal practices like mindful brushing of your teeth or mindful eating of a meal, mindful showering. You can pretty much apply it to anything. So let's just take a moment. I can't see you all, but I'm going to imagine that you're all in front of me. I'd like you to just close your eyes if that feels comfortable to you. We're going to just do a very brief practice. So just close your eyes, and I'd like you to just pay attention to your breath. Just watch your breath moving in and out of your body. Feeling a full inhalation and a full exhalation. Keeping your undivided attention on your breath. Great. And then go ahead and open your eyes again. So that's just a little taste of mindful breathing, paying attention to our breath in the moment. So when I do this little exercise in front of an audience, I'd say about 99.9% of the people, when I ask, how many people had their mind wander during that? 99.9% of those people raise their hand and say yes. So is our mind full or mindful? It's challenging to be mindful, and yet with practice, it gets easier and easier. So Jon Kabat-Zinn is kind of the father of mindfulness in the West. He created mindfulness-based stress reduction for chronic pain. It's a structured program, and there's been a number of spin-offs that have come from that, from suicidal ideation to drug use to eating, childbirth, and parenting. Kind of big long list there. The important piece that I think made it very approachable to people here in the West is that the skills were taught independent of the religious and cultural traditions. So it was totally secular. There was no talk about spirituality or religion, and that made it easier in the West to become accepted. So it wasn't that hippie doing meditation, it was this clinical program. It usually entails body scan where you pay attention to different parts of your body, some formal practice like sitting meditation and mindful movement, and then the informal practices that I mentioned of mindfulness of daily activities. Meditation and mindfulness has now been used in a number of different populations: healthy adults, adults with chronic illness, children and adolescents with chronic illness. And there's quite a bit of evidence for its use and effectiveness. There's been a few systematic reviews, and all of them kind of say the same thing, which is that meditation improves anxiety, depression, and pain. And that has a sustained effect up to 6 months out. And that that effect is equal to evidence-based treatments that are already being used, like cognitive behavioral therapy or even pharmacological treatments. So how does meditation work? There's been some study on this as well. There's some common themes that are emerging around how it works. First is attention regulation. So where I put my attention makes a difference in terms of how I feel. Bringing awareness to the body and being in touch with what is happening in my body. Also, emotion regulation. So being able to be comfortable in uncomfortable emotions, to understand that we are not our emotions and that they're just moving through us. And also compassion and self-compassion, that all these things improve health and also decrease rumination and experiential avoidance. And then finally, there's just a whole change in perspective of the self. So if I'm not my thoughts, if I'm not my emotions, then who am I? And kind of allowing people who participate in this to come to a deeper understanding of the nature of who they are. There's also been some really cool studies with neuroimaging to see what's happening in the brain. So this is one study. It was with 300 meditators, and they compared them to non-meditators. And they found 8 regions of the brain that were consistently altered in the meditators that had to do with meta-awareness, body awareness, self and emotion regulation, memory, and then communication between the two sides of the brain. This same researcher did the same study 2 years later, and this time had a lot more studies in it and included 527 people and 31 studies, again comparing to non-meditators, and they found very similar brain areas that were affected. I won't go into this, but this paper is really interesting because there were enough data where they could split it up by type of meditation. So what you see here is for all the meditation together, but if you look at the paper, if you're interested in looking at the paper itself, they actually break it down by the type of meditation. There was another really cool study that looked at, so these two were comparing meditators to non-meditators. So this study actually compared expert meditators from when they were meditating to not meditating and looked at the areas of the brain that were activated. So self-regulation, problem solving, adaptive behavior, interoception, monitoring body states, reorienting attention, and processing self-relevant information. So it's kind of the same story here that we're hearing. The same study looked at functional changes over the long term. So this is meditators versus non-meditators. And so when I say functional changes, what that means is they gave them a task to do to see how well they did that task. And the meditators had not improvements, but were better at doing these types of tasks. Again, we have memory, attention, perspective taking, being able to think through things, high level decision making in terms of complex tasks. The same study looked at structural changes over the long term. So what's this? This is actually the structure of the brain. Are there actual places in the brain that were different in the meditators versus the non-meditators? And we see slightly different things here, but again, a bunch of overlap. Self-regulation, self-control, focused problem solving, etc. So all these studies have been either comparing meditators to non-meditators or meditating to non-meditating. There haven't been that many studies looking at, say, naive meditators who have a meditation intervention to see if there's any changes in the brain. 2 that have been done or at Mass General and Harvard by Sarah Lazar and her team, and they saw just after 8 weeks changes in the amygdala, which has to do with emotion regulation, and then areas of memory processing, and again, this perspective taking and self-referential processing. So I find this pretty incredible that after an 8-week course, in this condition, it was mindfulness-based stress reduction, compared to a control group, they actually saw structural changes in the brain. It's pretty amazing. There's not much research on this sort of interventional piece, so this is an area that could really be developed quite a bit further. So what's next? This is kind of like the, academic outcomes, the, really safe research questions. Excuse me. Getting a little bit more into what's next, what are the topics that need to be developed, and what are more the noetic topics. So like I mentioned, this whole MBSR and the spin-offs are all taught in person in group settings. They're weekly classes, 2.5 hours each, over 8 weeks, and then there's a full day retreat. So in our research lab, we found that this was quite intensive, and a lot of people were just not able to travel, or they didn't want to do it. And especially with my post-traumatic stress disorder participants, they just really didn't want to leave their house and didn't want to be sitting around in a group of people. It triggered them too much to do that. So we started looking at alternative formats. We did a cross-sectional study looking at internet versus individual formats in terms of teaching meditation to people, and found that people, of course, this was administered online, so there's a bit of bias there, but people were very interested in internet or individual programs. So I think there's a lot of room there to study alternative formats of meditation, and also the dose of meditation. We really don't know what an appropriate dose is. This 8-week format was, created by John Kabat-Zinn, but different doses of that format haven't really been tested. And in fact, you'll see a lot of papers that have reduced doses, so the classes are shorter, the home practice is shorter, and are still seeing positive effects. So we decided to go for an internet version and created an internet mindfulness meditation program. It's administered online. It had videos. People would watch the video. They'd fill out questions, and they would have home practice that were guided meditations that they would listen to each week. But we set this up so they could really do this at any time and any place. So if someone's a shift worker, they could do it in the middle of the night, and also at their own pace. So we found that this program, compared to just having guided meditations, improved people's practice time, which was kind of one of our original research questions, was could it actually get them to practice meditation more? And it did. And this paper was actually just accepted for publication, which is exciting. So you'll be able to see that in the Journal of Medical Internet Research really soon. So many of you may know about this already. There's a ton of apps that have come out on mindfulness or meditation, meditation bells, or more structured programs like Headspace, where they walk you through different meditations and have you commit to a certain time each day. There was a really nice review of mobile applications for mindfulness apps, and here's the PMCID number if you want to look that up and read it. So there's a bunch of apps here. It feels like this kind of meditation technology field is almost getting a little too saturated at this point. What's challenging is that a lot of these apps don't have any evidence behind them, so they haven't really been tested. Like, they're out there in the public, but we don't know if they really work. All the clinical research are on, group programs that are in person, and there really isn't a lot of evidence on these apps. No one's really tested if they actually work. We think they work because we know meditation works, but do the apps actually work? Do they help? So that's a whole nother area of research that could be done. I know some people have started looking at this, but there's a lot of room there for growth. We, in collaboration with Richard Miller, creating an iRest smartphone app. So iRest is another form of meditation. It's really great for people with PTSD because it has some unique pieces to the program that are specific to them. So we're working on getting that app going and studied. So what about the beyond? So the alternative formats, are really fringe from the conservative meditation researchers, but can we take it even one step further, which is what we love to do at IONS. So, our consciousness, from what we learned through quantum physics, can go beyond our physical brain, can expand beyond this self right here. And IONS has done a great deal of research in terms of looking at that. And I won't get into that, but, paired connections from opposite rooms or random number generator research, we know that our consciousness goes beyond. And we are, one thing that we're doing now is a systematic review looking at these transcendent experiences of our consciousness. Some people might call it oneness or samadhi, or there's many different traditions that have different names for this experience of having our consciousness go beyond our body during a meditative state. So we've collected data on about 40 studies and see similarities and are working on finishing up that manuscript so we can get it published. So when people are in this transcendent state, what is happening to them? What is happening to their physiology? This is that future of meditation research project I told you about that was done here at IONS. It was over a number of years where we brought meditation expert researchers together to talk about what are the next steps in meditation research. How can we push the boundaries and really be asking these innovative noetic research questions? There's a little YouTube link there at the bottom that you can go to see some videos of the scientists that were interviewed who were part of that project. So as part of that, we did a cross-sectional study. We wanted to know, hey, we think all of these transcendent, transformative, extended human capacity things are happening with people during meditation. We hear all these anecdotes, but is it really, are people really experiencing that, or is that just because we're in our IONS network? So we did sent out a global survey. About 1,200 people completed it, and you see here where those people were around the world. It was about 1,100 people. Most were female, most middle-aged, but the age range was quite broad, and it was from over 66 countries on the planet, which is pretty amazing. And they all had quite a bit of average meditation experience, almost 15 years, and in the last month practiced more than daily or more than weekly. And there was quite a variation in terms of the types of meditation that they did. But here's the interesting part. So we asked them a number of questions of, have you had these experiences while you were meditating? And we grouped them in different categories. So physical sensations. Have you had altered breathing, altered sensations in the body, hearing, vision, smell, or taste? And you see here, these numbers are quite high. So 88% had altered breathing, 85% had unique sensations in the body, altered hearing, altered vision. Then we asked about spatial temporal experiences like altered time or increased synchronicities or altered space. And again, this is, a majority of the people are having these experiences while they're meditating. So sorry, I'm not sure if I made that clear. We asked them if they had any of these experiences during or just after meditation. Altered awareness, aha moments, altered identity, very low report of disturbing emotions. We wanted to get at that kind of adverse effects of meditation that no one really talks about either. Relational pieces, feeling a collective energy, feeling non-physical entities, feeling a connection with a teacher, and then extended human capacities, some sort of telepathic experience or clairvoyant experience, receiving a message while they're meditating. And then 31% actually had a psychokinetic experience where they felt like they could, move something or exert a force on the material world through their meditation. So we are working on this manuscript too, hoping to have that published soon. But we recommended 6 areas of research that really have a lot of room for growth in terms of what we could study. Mystical, transcendent, and transformative experiences, social and relational, the context of the meditation practice, so if that's done in a group or on your own or with a teacher, anomalous physical and perceptual phenomenon, extended human capacities, and difficult states and stages of meditation. So there's really no one doing work on these. Very few, I shouldn't say no one, there's very few people doing work on this, so there's a huge room for growth in becoming a meditation researcher looking at these research questions. So if you're interested in learning about our data or this program that we did here, this is the website, noetic.org-FOMR. All of the videos, so it's going to be an online course. We'll have the paper, there's a bibliography, and then we'll also have questionnaires up there, because often we'll get questions from researchers saying, well, I want to ask this, but I don't really know how to evaluate that in a systematic way. So we're hoping to have questionnaires online that people can download to use for their own research studies. All right, so what if you want to be a meditation researcher? What would my advice be, having gone through, my kind of circuitous path to end up where I am now? And I guess I should clarify this. What if I want to be a Noetic meditation researcher? So I don't think I could be doing the work I am now without the foundation that I had. So having an excellent science and research education, I think, is incredibly important. Trying to be able to publish papers as early as you can, volunteering with people, joining people's labs, to see if you can help out with the data collection or help out in some way so that you can get your name on publications. Find like-minded scientists. So, obviously IONS is a great resource and tool to be able to find researchers who are interested in asking noetic questions about meditation. Finding organizations that aren't afraid to ask the more difficult research questions like IONS, and there are others, we aren't the only ones, but searching those organizations out and seeing if you can plug in some way, depending on where you are with your education. And then I'll probably talk about this a little bit more later, but, deciding, hey, do I want to do an academic track or a non-academic track? Meaning, do I want to go through the system first and then jump off to do noetic stuff, or do I want to just go straight for the noetic stuff without going through the system? And, I put a bunch of info up there. There's a ton of people who've helped me pull off all the work that I've done, and I'm very, very grateful for them. And I will now open it up for questions.
Beautiful. Great. Thank you so much, Helane. And we're just going to have about 8 minutes here for any questions that have popped up over the course of this presentation. So again, you do have a question box and you can type in your questions. You can also raise your hand. There's a little image of a hand that you just press, and then I'll be able to see it on my side. So we'll give a few moments for some questions to come in here. And great, we already have several. Here we go. Okay, So I have one from Georgia, and she says, "Thank you for the amazing presentation, which speaks so much to me. I have learned the practice of Qigong meditation while living in Asia. This type of meditation moves energy through the body, and the purpose is for health, used for self or as alternative medicine." And she says, "I use it regularly, and recently I have cured myself from backache." And she says, "The only cure I have found." So that was not a question, but just a comment about the
Great.
power of Qigong. And
Wonderful. Yeah, there are some papers about Qigong actually. You might be interested in looking those up, especially for balance and older people.
oh, beautiful. And then she did have a follow-up question of what type of research is done on this type of meditation. So that was
Yes, yes. So there's not a whole lot on Qigong, but there are a few papers that are out there. If I remember, they were on balance and elderly. There's also, there's the movement Qigong, but there's also the energetic Qigong, which is more of an energy medicine. But I believe that there are also a few papers about that as well. So if you just go to Google Scholar and type in Qigong, I imagine that you'll, probably get 10 to 20 papers pop up.
beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Great. So we have a question here from Joshua Roberts, and he says, "Has any research been done in terms of longitudinal propagation of mental energy and intent?" So people like Tesla and more recently Eric Dollard have confirmed longitudinal waves. So I'm not quite sure. We might have you come on here to clarify, but he was just wondering, is there a more direct explanation of meditation than quantum? I don't know if
That's a great question. I know that I think I'm understanding your question. The intention piece, we're definitely studying intention here at IONS and are working on developing some clinical and non-clinical studies about intention. First clinical to see if it actually works, and then non-clinical to see how it works, because we aren't quite sure how it works yet. And maybe that's the answer to, I think, what you're saying about the longitudinal waves. And I don't know how it works, and I'm not familiar with that piece of it.
great, great, thank you. Okay, great. So we have a question here from Connor Hughes. And they say, "Through your research, have you found that there has been a demographic or maybe a subgroup within your pool that has the shared experiences of meditation at extremely young ages, but without any training?" So some of these more noetic experiences with people who don't have formal meditation training.
Right. There's been no formal study, as far as I know, that has looked into that. So that's a great project that you could take on if you want to. My my personal kind of anecdotal experience is that the further along we go, so today there are many, many more young people who are having these experiences than when I first started my research. So that, I don't know what's creating it, if there's like just an energetic shift on the planet or more people are into it, but that there are more people experiencing it younger and being okay with it, and then essentially becoming advocates for it. Which is why we're doing this presentation, right? Because we're speaking to the young people, because that's you, because we need you to help support this work and spread the word about it.
Mm, beautiful. Yes, yes, definitely. And I would love if you, kind of the point you ended at the end of your presentation, if you could talk about this academic versus non-academic track, because I think so many of us young people who have had experiences are just really intrigued by these phenomena that happen outside of kind of the mainstream scientific paradigm that we're currently in, and really wanting more information. So I'm just curious to hear your advice on going academic versus non-academic, and what are some ways to
Sure.
go forward with that. Yeah.
I think you could go both ways. So the academic track would be to go get a traditional, research degree, whether it's a master's or a PhD or a clinical track, kind of like I did. And then, attempt to do noetic research within an academic university. And then the other path would be to not, go through the academic track and just try to start doing noetic research without the academic training. I think the education piece is key because I believe in order to get more credibility in the noetic sciences, we really need to do rigorous research. And that means having researchers that know what they're doing and have been trained on what that means. And so I think having that foundation of a really solid education about what research is and the scientific method is very, very key. And then whether you go from there of trying to find, like at OHSU, it was amazing that I could do meditation research, that was pretty, innovative for them, that they even had a CAM or meditation research going on there. But I couldn't ask, the kind of crazy woo-woo questions that are amazing and that I can ask here at IONS. So there are some academic universities, in the US and definitely globally, where it's okay to ask those questions and you can do your research there. Or, you get your training and then you can, attempt to collaborate with other researchers or join other institutes that are more outwardly doing noetic research.
Beautiful. And so for the students, we do have students who are on the call who are in college or masters or getting their PhD. So as far as someone who's in school right now who is wanting to ask some of the more difficult questions or more out of the mainstream questions, do you have any advice for that?
I do. I think it's really important to come at your teachers in a very organized and clear and systematic way. So instead of, saying, oh, have you heard of the, blue guys that come out of the sewer? I'm just kind of with some random example that you say, hey, I'm really curious about this phenomenon that some people have experienced. Here is my research question. Are the blue guys coming out of the sewer real? Here are some ways that I think I could study that. I could put a video camera at each of the sewer things on this street. You know what I mean? So come at it in a kind of discerning and systematic way instead of just kind of throwing it out there for like a shock factor. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Definitely. That definitely makes sense. Great. And I'm just watching our time. I'm realizing we're right at 5 o'clock right now. So I just want to say thank you so much to you, Helene, for all the work that you are doing in the field and for talking to us today. And thank you for everyone who is here on the call with us. We do have a Consciousness Clubs program set up right now, and this is a part of that. So if you're on a college campus and you're interested to talk to other students about this and really dive deep into noetic topics, why it matters, and what we can do about it, we're here to support you in that, getting you up on our website and connecting you with other young people who are interested in these topics as well. So we're really passionate about growing our community, and we'll be having more ways to interact with the community of NextGen coming out each webinar that we're on. So definitely stay tuned, and we will be sending out a follow-up survey. So please send any of your feedback. We would love to hear from you from what works and what you're looking to hear for our future webinars as well. So thank you again so much for everything.
Good luck, everybody.
2 weeks for our next presentation with our CEO, Cassandra Beaton. And until then, thank you all so much. Have a beautiful day. Thank you.
Bye.